This happened many years ago. I was 8 or so at the time, and every day I would walk home from my elementary school. My house was a few miles down the road, so my mother thought it would be safe enough for me to walk by myself. It was a few months into the school year when it started happening. A beat-up looking Toyota would slow down enough for a couple of white guys that looked like they were in their mid to late 20s to follow me and yell insults at me. I was chubby back then, so they would call me fat and much more hurtful things. I'll always remember the driver. He looked to be the oldest of the bunch, with greasy blonde hair hanging down and partially covering his pimped, scared face. They would follow me until I reached the gas station that was halfway along my journey home. Then they would speed off, laughing loudly. For the first couple of weeks, I didn't tell anyone, thinking they would get tired of it. They didn't. A full month passed before I told my mother about it. She, of course, was rightly concerned about me and asked me how long it had been going on for. When I told her a month, she grew even more concerned. Her being a single mum, she couldn't pick me up from school because she was at work all day. So her solution was to send my older brother to meet me halfway, thinking this would defer them. It didn't. Another 4 months went by, with them continuing to follow me and throw insults at me. Then suddenly, it stopped. A whole month went by without them driving by, and we thought everything was safe again. We were wrong. Suddenly, out of the blue, I saw the old beat-up Toyota heading down the road towards me. Only the driver was in the car this time. He slowed down the car, flung open the passenger door, and proceeded to yell for me to get into the car. I was so scared I couldn't even speak. I just shook my head no and tried to walk faster. He continued to following me, demanding that I get into his car. I'll never forget the look on his face as he yelled at me. It was so full of rage. We finally got to the gas station and I made a break for it. I ran inside the station and up to the attendant. I told him what was happening and he let me hide behind the counter. The driver pulled into the gas station, hopped out of the car and came in. He demanded that the attendant tell him where I was. Claiming I was his daughter and I jumped out of his car. The gas station attendant glanced down at me and I shook my head, wildly mouthing that I did not know this man. The attendant said he didn't know where he was talking about and that he had to leave the store immediately. The driver began to yell wildly and started walking around the store looking for me. The attendant said he was going to call the police if the man did not leave. The man turned to him and said something I'll never forget. "I'll get that bitch, one way or another." The driver stormed out of the gas station and left. I sat there on the floor crying for what felt like hours. The attendant called the police and had them come over. When the police arrived, the attendant told them what had happened. A police officer knelt down beside me and asked me my side of the story. I told him everything. How him and a couple of others have been following me for months, how they would follow me and insult me, how they suddenly stopped, and how he tried to get me into his car. I don't remember much afterwards, other than them calling my mother and her meeting at our house. They took my mother's statements and then left. After that, my mother changed her work hours in order to come get me every day. For years, I lived in fear that that man with the greasy hair and pimple-scarred face would eventually get me. So to the man who followed me for months, insulting me and eventually trying to get me into his car, I'm not that scared little girl anymore. We better never meet. I used to work in a public library. I was responsible for arranging and sorting out books left by customers. One day, I worked on a night shift for extra money to fund my education expenses. At first, I thought it was a bad idea, considering that it's night and I have to attend classes tomorrow, but the raise was high, so I agreed. I started around 7 PM, where people were usually college students from a nearby university. Hours had passed, the number of people gradually decreasing until such time when only 2 people were around. I waited for them to finish, and they ended some time later. As usual, nothing really happens. All I can hear is just the ambient noise of cars passing by in the city. Until all of a sudden, while arranging the books in the periodical section, I saw something in my peripheral vision. It was a figure wearing all black like a shadow. At first, I thought it was my head playing tricks on me, so I brushed it off and proceeded to sleep. Suddenly, I woke up. My visions were blurry, but I saw the figure again, but this time vividly. It had red, grimacing eyes and a twisted smile that extends beyond a normal smile. Its teeth were so long and sharp, and its neck was elongated like a giraffe. Also, its body is covered in some kind of liquid, a mixture of blood and mud. I jerked up the moment I saw the figure. My heart was pounding like never before, and all of my limbs were shaking. It walked towards me slowly. Somehow I can't move, like I was completely frozen. All I could do was to close my eyes and try to think happy thoughts. But the next thing that happened was the moment I will never forget. As I opened my eyes slowly, the creature's face was already in front of me, and it screamed. It shrieked so high, my vision starts to blur. Until the next thing I knew, I woke up in my same position before I dozed off. I felt relieved that it was just a nightmare, and decided to continue working right after. In the morning, the security guard greeted me with a horrifying look and asked, "Do I know what I was doing during my shift?" Confused, I just responded with a placid look. He then escorted me to the maintenance room and showed me the CCTV cameras. What it has captured completely traumatized my entire life and prompted me to never ever work in a night shift again. In the video, I saw myself just standing in the same aisle when I arranged the books before, but it wasn't me at all. It was a different person. Then, my head turned abruptly, casting a grimacing smile in front of the camera, while my eyes were red as blood. I'm 25 years old now, and this encounter, or prolonged experience really, started when my family and I moved into an old house when I was 8 that my parents renovated. The house is itself that's fine, however, we had a long garden, and at the end of the property a huge bricked barn. It had been used in the past by the military or later on by firefighters for training because of its high ceiling and appearing beams, which were used for rope exercises. Anyway, I remember vividly when I first stepped inside. Its gigantic structure impressed me, but I was struck by how cold it was. I don't remember if it was winter, but I used to be a very skeptical kid and always found the logical explanation, until I couldn't. Over the years, I lived there until I was 18. It was always freezing inside. Summer, winter, it didn't make a difference. But maybe it was how it was built that made it this way. If it was only that, everything would have been fine and would have remained that skeptical kid. But I began to feel things when I was inside, like someone watching me from behind or feeling a presence when I knew perfectly well I was alone. There was even one area that I could walk to because I felt complete terror at this very spot. I began hating that feeling and thought I was a scaredy cat, but it only intensified. The window of my room had a view on the garden and automatically the barn. Sometimes, from the corner of my eye, I would see someone inside, but when I would look properly, no one was there. And if the door was closed, that meant none of my family members either. Yet again, I brushed it off, thinking it was an optical illusion or something. What I couldn't explain, however, was the emotions I felt when I was inside. Sadness, helplessness, sorrow. It raised chills down my spine every single time, but I couldn't understand why I was sensing or feeling these emotions. It went on for years, to the point I didn't want to go there anymore. I thought I was going insane. Until one day, a few years before we moved, my parents got told why the last owners abandoned the property. They had a 15-year-old boy who got bullied in school very badly, and he hung himself in the barn, right above the spot that terrified me. Okay, so about 1 or 2 years ago, I moved into a new house with my parents, and me and my family have witnessed very suspicious activities. First, when I'm trying to study or read a book, sometimes weird things happen. It's like the book I'm reading is getting grabbed by an invisible creature or person because it doesn't fall or anything. It literally gets grabbed, violently grabbed. The movements of the book when he gets grabbed clearly shows that it's not falling. Someone is grabbing it. And then, when I get it back, it gets grabbed again. It happened multiple times, and that really creeped me out, especially because the movements are very human-like. Second, weird things happen in my kitchen. Sometimes the oven turns on alone, and I feel like someone is playing with the dishes at night since I hear weird noises. Also, sometimes when I'm eating alone or I put something on the table, it's the same thing as the book. It gets grabbed. I didn't get to screenshot anything on photo except one thing. When it was night and I was just listening to music, I heard a couple noises near the window. I thought it was just the wind, but a couple minutes when I woke up, I noticed a human's hand trace. Well, not that human. It looked very skinny, like it was a skeleton. I took a screenshot of it and immediately went downstairs to tell my family. My mother went upstairs and checked if everything was okay, but the hand trace just disappeared, like it never existed. She and I looked outside, but there was nothing. Since I was upstairs and it was a balcony, I don't know the story of the house or anything, but it's kind of big. We have a garden and a front yard. The garden has a pool, chairs, and well, basically everything a garden has. While the front yard is where our cars are. We have 2 bathrooms, 1 downstairs, 1 upstairs, a huge living room, a kitchen and a minibar. We also have a garage, 4 rooms, 2 toilets and 2 dressing rooms. We also have 4 dogs, 2 cats and a parrot. I know it must be useless to say that, but maybe it can help if you want to give me advice. Maybe it's just the pets or my family. Sometimes I also feel like the creature is trying to communicate with me. My little sister was playing with her dolls when one of them just moved and was now placed in a very creepy way. She was staring at me and looked like she was trying to hide from my sister and me, trying to silently stalk me without me noticing. It's happened many times, and it was always with the same toy, so we decided to stop playing with it. But I think the toy was kind of possessed. I might be paranoid though. Maybe it's just my imagination. I've been an HVAC service technician in Jacksonville, Florida for almost 19 years. I go to hundreds of different properties each year for work, troubleshooting AC equipment, and I've had more than one unnerving experience over the years. Dark attics of homes from the 1800s, narrow and damp basements, tight and pitch black crawl spaces, the absolute worst, etc. This happened 6 years ago in St. Augustine, Florida, which happens to be the oldest city in the United States, founded in 1565. A wealthy customer of ours purchased a house, you could call it a mansion, and was having it remodeled. The homeowner was a huge history buff and an avid collector of authentic artifacts from the Middle Ages, swords, armor, etc. One room was being custom built to showcase his collection of weapons and armor. It was the most talked about room on the job site. The tradesman called it the night room because there were legit suits of armor in there that were actually worn into battle. One suit of armor was particularly disturbing because the knight died while wearing it, supposedly in a jousting match. It had a very large puncture in the chest. It always kind of creeped me out. Picture a large room with an 8x8 table covered with glass for swords and shields in the center of the room, and cubbies on all 4 walls. Each cubby displayed a suit of armor and had a small LED light on top to light them up. The carpenters did a great job with that room. It legit looked like a museum. Well, after a year of working on this job, it was finally done, and the homeowners were planning on moving in within a few days. It was Friday, and I had a list of small final touch things that I needed to get finished. One of the security alarm guys walked over to me and asked, if I had been experiencing any electrical issues with the HVAC controls. He said they kept having issues with the motion sensors and couldn't figure out why. I told him I hadn't run into any issues with the ACs, asked him what kind of issues they were having. He said everything worked normally except for the motion sensors in the night room. He said the sensors were glitching the last few nights and showing multiple motion triggers throughout the night. That would be impossible because the building was locked up daily and the video showed no movement when the sensors tripped. I could tell he was frustrated. He thought there might be a problem with the supply voltage. I wished him luck and got back to work. Unfortunately, I didn't get my list completed in time and decided I would just come back early the next morning to finish. The next day was a Saturday, so I'd have the whole site to myself and we'll be able to finish up in peace. So, I drive back to the site the next morning around 6 AM and turned onto the long, narrow gravel driveway to the house. This was the first time I had actually been to this job site without sunlight, and I vividly remember feeling slightly unsettled as I slowly approached the massive construct. I noticed a small blinking reddish coloured light from one of the windows. The light seemed to be coming from inside the night room. I instantly remembered what the security guy told me about the motion sensors tripping yesterday, causing my arm hair to stand on end. So here I am, completely alone, about to enter this very old and very big house in the oldest American city, in the dark, knowing that something just tripped the motion sensors inside that house. I remember like it was yesterday how my hands were shaking as I tried putting the key in the lock. I remember pausing for what felt like 10 minutes, but was probably a few seconds, and telling myself, "You're being silly. There's nothing in there to be afraid of." But I admit, I was kind of scared. Eventually, I turned the key, pushed the door open, and stared into the very dark corridor that led directly to the night's room. As I peered down the mudroom hallway from the quarter-open door, I could see a red, glowing light. I knew it must have been the faulty motion sensors, but at that point, my mind was racing. So I stood, frozen in place, peering down that pitch-black hallway, watching that red light slowly come on and then fade away. When it lit up, it would softly illuminate the single suit of armor I could see from my vantage point. The night was facing me and would light up an apple red color for a moment, seemingly at random times. The light wasn't a steady pattern either, which I thought was strange. If I took 10 minutes contemplating turning the door key, I must have spent an hour engaged in that intermittent staring contest with the silent, unmoving suit of armor. I really did not want to enter that dark hallway. The fancy interactive room lights weren't functional yet, and the closest working light switch was about 20 feet down the hallway. I pep-talked myself and slowly built up my nerves and was about to go for it when it happened. Something clashed deep inside the house. Something inside that house just made a loud noise, which meant something inside the house must have been moving. The sudden noise startled me even more. I froze like a deer in a spotlight. To this day, I don't know what caused that sound. It sounded like a metal tray or something fell to the ground. It made a clang, clink, clink, clink sound, and then silence. Not a sound. The house was still. My armored adversary was still watching me, standing me completely motionless at the other end of that long, dark passage. Now, I'm not one who easily gets scared, especially not scared enough to completely stop what I'm doing, and especially if I'm at work. I'll keep it 100 though. The last noise I heard in the house that morning was the sound of me closing and locking the door. I told myself, hey, it's Saturday. I'll just come back on Monday when I'm not alone to finish up. So I got in my truck and left. I never did figure out what that noise was. From what I hear, they ended up disconnecting the motion sensors in the night room because they couldn't stop them from tripping. So weird. I ended up never going back to that house. TLDR, medieval night sets off motion sensors inside very old, possibly haunted home in the oldest city in America. But I wasn't scared. This happened about 3 years ago. I was 18 at the time and on a road trip with my family and dogs. At about 7 one night, we stopped in a little mountain town to stay the night and explore the woods and hiking trails. After our hike, we drove around until we found a cheap motel. It was pretty run down, but pretty much the only place with a room available that would take our family of 5 and 2 dogs. It was pretty far out of the way of the rest of the town, no other buildings in sight. The motel was shaped like an L, and our room was on the corner of the L. That's relevant later. There was a front door and a back door that led out to the parking lot of the motel, and a grassy wooded area respectively. It was probably about 10 at night by this point, and we were all winding down for the night. I was having trouble falling asleep, and decided to get up and take our dogs for a quick walk and get some fresh air. It was pitch black out at this point, no city lights or anything, and it was a small town, and I got a really creepy feeling when I went outside. You know, the hair on the back of your neck standing up, all of that. My dog seemed uneasy too, and I wanted to just brush it off as they probably just sensed all of the wildlife around us. But I hurried the dogs back into the room and made sure that both the front and back doors were locked. Maybe only 2 or 3 minutes after I got back into the room, I heard the front door knob gently rattling, like someone was trying to open it. I just froze. My entire family was asleep and I was 2 seconds away from waking up my dad. Then the doorknob jiggled even harder, and then whoever was out there started pounding on the door. Obviously my family woke up at this point, just in time to hear someone right on the other side of that crappy, flimsy motel room door start yelling at us to let him in. We were all just kind of frozen, and my dad starts yelling back, telling the guy out there to get lost or call the cops. The knocking and yelling stops, and we figure out he got scared off. Then the guy comes around to the back door and repeats the same process. I honestly don't know how those cheap doors held him back. Maybe he didn't want to get in that bad. But he eventually gave up, probably from the combination of my dad's threats and 2 very large dogs losing their minds barking. Thinking back to that, I just get a sick feeling in my stomach. What if I hadn't locked the doors as soon as I got back? Had the guy been watching me outside and decided to follow me to my room? It was just odd that he knew to go around to the back door and check that too. I wanted to tell you guys about my mentally unstable neighbour, who I'll be calling Kay to respect her privacy. Because I don't want to call her crazy or anything else that contributes to the stigmatisation of severe mental illness, this story isn't going to be exaggerated to be more creepy or anything like that. It's just what happened. We had just moved into our new home, which we had recently built in a town in Texas. It started when my parents began finding small pills strewn about our backyard near the fences, just a few here and there. We googled the numbers on the pills to find most of them were antidepressants, but I cannot remember the exact names as this was about a year or so ago. But I think there was at least one pill that Google said was an antipsychotic medication. We were pretty confused, but mostly worried about our dog eating them before we could find them. This kept happening over a few weeks, and then we found unopened water in Gatorade bottles thrown over our fence. The side of the house had a somewhat empty lot next door. We had soon-to-be neighbours building their new house there, but it wasn't like the construction workers were throwing their trash over our fence. These bottles were unopened and full. For reference, Kay lives a few houses down from mine, on the corner. Between our house and hers are 2 empty lots, the lot closest to us with a new house being built there. After another week or so of this came the fights, or maybe incidents as I should call them. Kay would routinely storm out of her house and go yell at the construction workers. I don't know what about, but apparently about nonsense things. Sometimes she would yell from her yard. Sometimes she would walk onto the lot to yell. Several times she has been seen yelling at no one, just standing in the lot or walking around the construction supplies and arguing to herself. By now, most of the people on our street knew of her and were afraid of her. Up to this point, I had never seen Kay. I attended university an hour away, and was only home on the weekends. One weekend, my parents left me home alone in the middle of the day. I think they were at the gym or the grocery store. I'm an only child too. I had just gotten out of the shower and walked downstairs to hear yelling. I peek outside the windows to see a middle-aged blonde lady arguing. I couldn't see who she was talking to, but I could hear another male voice now. I hadn't met Kay yet, but I also hadn't met my new neighbours, but my parents had. So my first thought was that this was a new couple building next door, my new neighbours. It seemed like they were arguing about the house. After a few minutes, the blonde lady walks away, and then a couple come out of the unfinished house, and they get into their car parked on the street. I'm really confused at this point, especially when the man walks over to my door and rings the doorbell. I'm very introverted, so I opted not to answer the door. Kinda stupid, I know. My parents weren't home anyway, so it wouldn't have made a difference, I thought. After a minute, he walks back to his car, and from the window, I can see he is sitting there on the driver's side, doing something. He comes back with a note that he leaves on my door, and then he and his wife drive away. After I'm sure they're gone, I get the note and read it. Apparently, my neighbours were checking out the house when they saw Kay, the blonde lady, attempting to get into my backyard. They confronted her, and that's when the yelling started. In a rush, I sent a pic of the note to my mom, called my mom, etc. She didn't seem that worried about it, but I knew that we always left the back door unlocked during the day. If she had gotten through our fence gates, she could have easily walked inside the house while I was home alone. After that, my stepdad got some new locks for the little gate doors at the front of our house. Things continued like this for a while, with Kay trying to get into our backyard, throwing pills and water bottles over our fence. A couple times she was rummaging around our front flower bed too. There was one instance which really unnerved my parents. We have a small alleyway that runs behind our house, connecting everyone's driveways. Another neighbour who lives across the alleyway from us contacted my parents to let them know that they had seen Kay looming around our back fence gate at around 3 AM that night. Not sure why those neighbours were awake at that time, but they said Kay was just standing there in the middle of the alleyway, staring at our back fence. Knowing we had someone essentially casing our house in the middle of the night was really starting to freak us out. The guy who built our house, who I'm naming Jay, somehow got into contact with someone who knew Kay's family pretty well. Everyone was wanting answers to why Kay was acting like this, and since Jay had built most of the houses in the area and was well connected, people were asking him. I think he was friends with the realtor who sold the house to Kay, but I'm not sure. Anyway, Jay was able to give us a lot of information about Kay. Apparently, her family was rich and owned a very big corporation, like one of the biggest in the US. I'm not naming it, again for her privacy. And her family had essentially placed her in this house away from the rest of them. They didn't want to deal with her mental illness. But more importantly, 2 years ago, her only son died of a drug overdose, and she's been unstable ever since. The reason why she wants to get into our backyard and keeps throwing stuff over the fence is because she believes her son is there. Not sure if she thinks we're holding him hostage or his ghost is here or what, but that's why. She's been to several psychiatric hospitals throughout her life, and now she's stopped taking her medication because she's throwing it over our fence. Things finally came to a head in January 2020, when during one of her usual arguments with the construction workers, she pulled out a BB gun. She was already very aggressive, so the BB gun just made things 100 times worse. I don't know if she just threatened to shoot them or actually did, but the cops were called regardless. It took them a while to talk her down, with several police officers swarming the street with big guns. I'm thankful that my parents had been filing police reports, so when they came, they knew about Kay's history of mental illness. I am both grateful and a little surprised that they handled the situation so well, because not a lot of police departments properly train their officers to deal with mentally ill patients, especially ones experiencing psychosis. I still have ring camera videos of the police officers with big rifles loitering around our front lawn while addressing the situation. I might post that for proof, but I'm not sure if that's necessary. Anyway, after that incident, Kay was not seen for a long time. We hear she was in a psychiatric hospital for many months, after which she returned to our neighbourhood. She's doing much better now. She no longer does any of the strange behaviours she used to. Almost every day, me and my parents see her walk her dog past our house. She's clearly sticking to her routine, and I'm happy for her.